Police, how can I help?
There was a 999 call received from dog walkers that had found a suitcase on a lay-by just near the road.
People came across the suitcase and opened it, and inside was the remains of a person.
Local people found it extraordinary that such an incident could happen here.
For a murder to happen, not only a murder, but a murder on this scale, it was absolutely shocking for the community.
We had knowledge that he had over £270,000 worth of debt, and he was struggling to pay off those debts.
There was blood absolutely everywhere in that room, on the sofa, on the walls and on the ceiling.
Through extreme measures, he used the alternative of planning the murder of his friend.
Tintwistle is an idyllic village nestled on the edge of the Peak District.
Tintwistle is a typical Peak District village. It's got a mixture of beautiful stone cottages. It's on the banks of the Longdendale Valley, and behind it are the Tintwistle Moors, known as the Nar and the Lower Moor. And it has stunning views over the Longdendale Valley and the 5 reservoirs.
A very parochial village where people can leave your back door open, no problems.
In Tintwistle, everyone knows each other. It's a very, neighbourly feel. It's a very close-knit community.
We've got a lot of people who have a lot of very good neighbours, and I think everybody supports each other.
In terms of crime rates in Tintwistle, it's fairly, non-existent.
But all this is about to change when the peace is shattered early one morning.
On the 10th of October, there was a 999 call received from dog walkers that had found a suitcase on a lay-by just near the road.
The location was on a main road that went between Manchester and Sheffield, and it dipped down a little bit into Derbyshire. It was a car park off the main road, but it was an area that was quite popular for walkers.
As you come into Tintwistle from the east, you go along what's called the Woodhead Pass, and this particular suitcase was dumped just over the wall as you go into the village beside the first reservoir.
As I remember, it's like this people passing by this lay-by and came across the suitcase and opened it, and inside the suitcase was the remains of a person.
Police are immediately dispatched to the area.
There's quite a long drive, really, from the point where I got the call to the point where I arrived at the scene. Just to give you some idea around the geography, when I first got the call, I was in Derby, which is here. The deposition site was all the way to the north of the county, to the north of Derbyshire, and as you can see, it's right at the very tip of the county.
Upon arrival, they are met with a gruesome sight.
It looks like the suitcase has been set on fire, and inside that suitcase we have a body of a man whose head has been removed, whose arms have been removed, and whose feet have been removed.
It was a Samsonite suitcase that was in an extremely charred state. But then it became apparent, and we had a human torso that had been extremely cruelly dismembered and burnt.
As a crime, this is really, really vicious. For somebody to remove all the limbs of a body, never mind commit the murder itself.
Derbyshire Constabulary launch a murder investigation, and news of the horrific find soon spreads around the village.
Oh, like chicken pox. Everybody talks about it, we all know about it. You go in the local shops. Have you heard?
In Tintwistle, it's a really neighbourly community. Everyone knows each other. If there's gossip, someone down the road will know about it in 10 minutes or so. Considering the crime rate was fairly non-existent, for a murder to happen, not only a murder, but a murder on this scale, it was completely shocking for the community.
I think local people found it extraordinary that such an incident could happen here. I think, like all major crimes that happen in what everybody would regard as somewhere quiet and peace-loving, it adds to people's fear that something else could happen, or something else could happen as a result of it.
Police immediately cordon off the crime scene.
The big issue you've got here is you're out in the open. So there's two things. There's the weather. So rain can come and wash away your evidence. But secondly, you've got the issue of privacy. This is a really busy road. There's lots of traffic coming through, and you need to protect the privacy of that individual. That's really important.
Really what you want to do is secure and preserve as much evidence as you can. So there would have been things like identifying where the scene is, making sure that it was cordoned off, that there was enough police officers to ensure that nobody stumbled across the scene.
Beyond the scene, you might be looking at further searches. Has anything discarded, any clothing, any weapons, etc. So this particular point is very important from a forensic point of view. So you would want to be able to get some of your experts down, you want your crime scene manager, you'd really want your pathologist to be coming down to having a look at the scene, just so they have a full understanding of what's here, so that they can do a better job down the line.
And what I would do there is I'd have a discussion with the crime scene manager about the best way of removing the body to a hospital, but also making sure that we didn't lose any evidence while we were in that process, because the evidence that you might lose might be the only evidence that you get that helps you with the case.
Once you start moving a body, then the issue there is a potential loss of evidence, so there'll be some sampling requirements there and then, even in the circumstances where a body's been burnt. For example, there may well be fibres that have been transferred from the offender to the body, or alternatively to the suitcase that haven't been damaged. It's really important to pick those up at that point.
The body is removed, and police focus on one thing.
But I think when you look at the wider picture around this is somebody's life. This is that they've lost, and you know what I really want to do is find out who the family is, who are the relatives and the friends of this individual, and they need informing at the earliest opportunity.
This was going to be a huge challenge for the police now, because there's absolutely nothing to go by. They've just found a torso. There's nothing to identify the person, no fingerprints.
When you're looking at the difficulty presented by not being able to make an identification, the first things that we considered were things like the police database, and then we started looking at people who were missing, but because we had quite a wide geographical area, it was looking at people who were perhaps missing from West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire, Greater Manchester, as well as Derbyshire. But it's an arterial route, could have been from anywhere.
With very little to go on, the pressure is on for the police to try to identify the body.
You head towards the things that you are quite confident that will bring about an identification, but then when the obvious start to go, then it progressively becomes more and more difficult, and you start considering any other locations or any other information that you may get that you think will help you identify who this person was. So it made it a really difficult inquiry, where we were having to be very, very precise around the investigative tactics that we used to try and find out who were the people who were involved.
Whilst the police await lab results from the pathologist's examination of the body, their attention turns to other lines of inquiry.
So the first point of call for the police now would have been to conduct local inquiries, asking people if they'd seen anything, if they'd heard anything.
When these things initially happen, all sorts of stories start to abound.
But the question on everybody's lips is, who is the victim?
Foremost in my mind was, there is a family somewhere whose loved one has been murdered, and they don't know about it.
In the picturesque Peak District, police have launched a murder investigation after an unidentified body was discovered in a suitcase which had been set alight.
So the condition of the body, when we found it, the head had been removed, both hands had been removed, and the feet had been removed. There were two things that I sort of realised quite quickly. One, that was a deposition site. That wasn't where the murder had taken place. That was where the body had been placed afterwards. And the second thing was, and it was around whether the victim and the offender knew each other. And I took the view that why would one take the steps to hide somebody's identity if they didn't know each other? So I sort of realised in my own mind that if I worked out who the victim was, I would be able to work out who the offender was. And if I worked out who the offender was, I'd be able to work out who the victim was.
Unable to identify their victim, police await the results of the post-mortem.
It's slightly unusual. There was no cause of death. So this tells us that there was no marks or scars or any wounds on the body parts that we had recovered, and clearly the victim's head had been removed. When we looked at the information that we did have from the post-mortem, this was a light-skinned male, and that's all that we were able really to glean from that. From the post-mortem, there were no marks, scars, tattoos or anything that would have assisted us making an identification.
Police trawl the missing persons database for any clues as to who their victim could be.
At the time, there was a lot of missing persons cases, so this could have been absolutely anybody.
There's quite a lot of missing people reported every single day in Derbyshire. And it was a case of refreshing those every single day, because the person may not be reported on day 1 or day 2 or day 3, but every single day going through the detail of who those individuals were and seeing if we could make a connection between the body that we got and that person who was missing.
With little to go on, Derbyshire Constabulary hold a press conference.
The purpose of today's press conference is to ask for the public's help to identify the victim. We are working with other forces to ascertain whether our victim may have been reported missing in a neighbouring county, but we recognise that he might not have been reported missing at all. We are therefore asking members of the public to come forward if they have not seen a neighbour or a friend or a colleague, or indeed any members of their family recently. A special call centre has been set up to take calls from across the UK, and we are urging people to provide information in relation to this murder investigation.
Information soon starts to filter into the police.
It became apparent that a number of dog walkers had seen the suitcase but hadn't realised exactly what was inside.
So in order to better understand the time frame that we're looking at and understand when the body may have been put in the car park, we did substantial inquiries with people who'd been on the road. We were asking for people who'd got dash cam footage or people that had driven past. And there were a few positive responses out of that, which were able to tell us that the fire had been set late the night before.
With 3 different drivers claiming to have seen a fire around 11:30 p.m. on the 9th of October, officers on the ground can now focus on who was in the area around that time, in a bid to identify the potential killer.
So that was really useful from the initial investigation point of view to be able to really narrow those timelines so you could concentrate on that time period and work out from there what the offender had done, where he'd been, where he'd likely to travel to and from.
Police now ramp up their inquiries.
There was a bolt out of the blue, and we got we got a phone call in from South Yorkshire to inform us that there was actually an ANPR camera on the A628. So the phone call that we got on that day was, do you know you've got an ANPR camera on the 628? And no, we didn't, but thanks very much for telling us, that's really great.
Police immediately trawl through the automatic number plate recognition cameras to establish which vehicles had passed through the area on the night in question.
The police followed ANPR camera footage and located a Mercedes vehicle that triggered the camera just after 11 o'clock on Sunday the 9th, the evening before, and then didn't actually make it all the way across Woodhead Pass Road and to trigger the other ANPR camera at the other end.
It was the only vehicle that passed in the window of opportunity So every other vehicle only went in one direction, either towards Manchester or towards Yorkshire.
All the vehicles, over 200 that had travelled along that road within the time period, down to one that had turned around and returned back to the Manchester area.
That was a strong indication that that vehicle was the one that deposited the body here on the night of the 9th.
After 10 days of round-the-clock investigations, and still having no clue as to the identity of their victim or suspect, this discovery is key.
The Mercedes triggered the camera on the evening before, between 23:09 and 23:26. So straight away that was something I was very interested in, and we started to make some inquiries as to who might be the owner and what might be the significance of that vehicle.
This was absolutely key in the investigation. After 10 days of not finding anything, they needed to find out who this silver Mercedes belonged to.
As it happened, the vehicle didn't have any insurance, and so there was a reason to go and stop it and speak to the driver and have a look at the vehicle.
After further investigation, police discover that the vehicle is registered to someone living in Manchester.
So the owner of the vehicle was somebody called Ming Jiang.
Once the vehicle had been identified, it was registered to Ming Jiang, and therefore this triggered for the police to monitor him, make inquiries as to where he lived, inquiries of where he went.
There was so much pressure on the police. At this point in the investigation, it was very time sensitive. After 10 days, they really needed to find this person. At this point, the person who committed the crime could have run away, they could have covered up, or they could have very much so committed again.
Initial inquiries reveal Ming Jiang lives in Manchester, so Derbyshire Constabulary enlist the help of their colleagues over there.
When Greater Manchester Police assisted us, they were able to locate the vehicle, and because it was driven without any insurance, we were able to seize it. And when we seized the vehicle, we were then able to forensically examine it. And what I was looking for in that forensic examination was to find any evidence that might link to the body that we've got and the scene that we'd preserved some days before.
The police found a speck of blood in the rear that was the size of a 10p coin.
This was a really, really big moment in the investigation. What I would be looking to find out there is a blood spot in the boot of the vehicle the same as the blood that we found at the scene. So the DNA was sent away for comparison. It was the longest 24 hours I can imagine. Eventually it came back, and it came back with the news that we were really hoping for, and that was that the blood in the boot matched the DNA of the blood at the scene.
The blood match in the boot of the car puts Ming Jiang at the forefront of the investigation.
I felt this was the first time we were getting a breakthrough, and first time we were getting an indication as to what may have taken place here. So as soon as we got the positive information about the DNA hit, it was a case of let's get this person arrested at the earliest opportunity.
So Ming Jiang was arrested on the 20th of October. They'd attended a casino in Manchester where they believed he was, and he was arrested at that location.
Now that the police have Ming Jiang in custody for questioning, time is of the essence to find evidence linking him to the murder.
What is also part of the inquiry is to start doing an evidential search around him to understand where he lived, what his movements were, and whether there was any other evidence that we'd be able to glean from his home address.
The police searched the home address, and they found bloodstains all over the carpet. There was blood dispersion across all of the walls. They had been painted over, and quite a shoddy clean-up had taken place. It was an extensive clean-up, but there was still blood throughout the flat and in the bathroom.
There was traces of blood absolutely everywhere that weren't immediately apparent to the eye, but there were things like the blood had seeped through the laminate flooring. There was blood that was soaked into the cushions on the sofa. There was blood on the walls and on the ceiling.
So the scene was a really rich source of evidence for us. The main evidence we got were 2 finger marks in blood. So we got one under a table. The evidence you're really looking for there is the offender's fingerprint in the victim's blood. And getting that in 2 places was very, very critical evidence.
At this point, it's absolutely safe for the police to say that the murder took place in this apartment.
Days into the investigation of the body in the suitcase found in a Derbyshire village, police have discovered a car linked to the murder and have made an arrest.
A forensics team investigated the car. They swabbed the blood. This matched the torso that was found in the suitcase. So at this point, the police were then able to arrest Mr. Ming Jiang.
Forensic tests reveal the blood on the torso in the suitcase is a match for the blood in Jiang's flat in Manchester, making Ming Jiang their #1 suspect.
So the investigation moved over to Manchester because it became clear from the Derbyshire point of view that the offence had actually taken place in Manchester. As a result of their inquiries, that took them to the flat at Falconwood Way in Beswick. And as a result of what they found there, they felt very strongly that that was actually the place of the murder. And so as a result of that, that would then become a Manchester investigation.
But police are no closer to identifying their victim.
So as the inquiry goes on, the stress and the pressure builds. As a senior investigating officer, it's a privilege to do that role. But you do take the responsibility of having to investigate the death of somebody, and you owe that responsibility to the family of the victim. So I was really concerned about finding out who that was and getting that information to them at the earliest opportunity.
However, searches of their suspect and his car have led to a discovery.
When we did the evidential search of the Mercedes vehicle, we found some banking documents of another person called Yang Lu.
He had certain possessions on his person. At the time, he had his passport, he had his bank cards.
And that led us to an address in Salford at Media City. And there were some lines of inquiry that we needed to conduct at that address and find out what the relationship was with this person and how they fitted into the inquiry.
Police immediately sent officers to Yang Lu's address.
There was no answer, it was nowhere to be seen by anybody. So I made the decision that we were going to force entry into that apartment and find out really who this person was. So we forced entry into the address at Media City. Nothing particularly remarkable about the address, but what it did allow us to do was take some items from there which we knew the owner of that apartment would have left their DNA on. So very quickly we were able to send that away for analysis.
Finally, there is a breakthrough. Results come back matching Yang Lu's DNA to the torso, as well as the blood found in Ming Jiang's flat and car. Almost 2 weeks after the discovery, police have the name of their victim.
So what we did find out was that Yang Lu was a 27-year-old male, originally from China.
Yang Lu came to the UK in 2000 to study, where he went to the University of Leeds. His family actually worked really, really hard to save money so that he could study in the UK and achieve his goals and his dreams.
He finished his master's degree, and after that he stayed here and become a shares and stock trader.
He'd not brought any of his family with him over here, so if you look at the reasons why he may not have been reported missing, his family simply didn't know that he wasn't where he should have been.
Police now have the harrowing task of informing their victim's family.
This was a really difficult case from a family point of view. Under normal circumstances, we'd want to inform the family in person, And in the end, we actually had to make the call to the family in order to inform them. That's something that we wouldn't normally do under any circumstances, but unfortunately with the distance involved, we had no other option. I arranged for contact through Interpol with the Chinese authorities in order to let the family know. In the meantime, we allocated family liaison officers in order that we could make the process as smooth as possible.
Yang's family were absolutely devastated when they found out, their only son had been murdered. Not only murdered, but in such a vicious way.
And then they arrived in the UK in the second week of November.
Yang was very close to his family. They spoke on the phone near enough every single day. He actually vowed to go back to China and look after his family if one of them was to fall ill. And I think that just shows the tight-knit relationship they have, because he'd built himself this fantastic life in the UK and he was really willing to give that up to go back and look after his family.
When the family was here, then I helped them in different ways because they can't speak English. So most of the time that if they have something do not understand about the police procedure, and I help to explain them.
They were completely grief-stricken. They had lost their only son, who had come to the United Kingdom to study at university. He was a very clever young academic man and a very bright young man, and they were deprived of their son.
With time running out to hold their suspect in custody, police need to work fast to build enough evidence to charge him.
Ming Jiang is a danger to the public, and we would really want to be in a position where he'd be charged at that point. The secondary issue is he's a big flight risk. We'd be worried about him kind of moving back to China or elsewhere.
We had to prove that he was the person that had committed that murder. We knew he was involved and could prove that to the extent, and we then had to build a case.
There's no doubt that Ming Jiang tried to cover his tracks quite extensively, but the problem is there was just too much evidence. The evidence there in particular was extremely strong. It's almost the best evidence you can find at a scene, which was Yang Lu's blood and Ming Jiang's fingerprint.
Police now believe Ming Jiang murdered Yang Lu in his flat, dismembered his body, and dumped his torso in a suitcase before setting light to it. But they need to work out the link between the pair and establish when the murder happened, so trawl CCTV footage in the days leading up to the discovery of the suitcase.
CCTV footage revealed a man getting off the tram in Manchester. He crossed the road to meet another man and they went in the direction of a flat in Beswick.
That tram stop was the closest one to where Ming Jiang's home address was.
The male he met up with perfectly fit the description of Ming Jiang. And in addition to that, we had telephone evidence that showed the two phones of Ming Jiang and Yang Lu came together. And interestingly, from that point onwards, the phones always remained together. And that was the very last time that Yang Lu was seen.
With the evidence building, police make a decision.
So I authorised one charge of murder.
Ming Jiang denies any involvement in the murder, so the police and prosecution need to build a case for trial and establish a motive, meaning they have to delve deeper into the lives of the two men.
Yang Lu was definitely a responsible young man. He invested in stocks and shares, and he knew how to make money. He was very clever in that sense. He'd built himself this brand new life in the UK. He really had a bright future ahead of him. Yang really enjoyed gambling. He was a very big gambler. He'd go to casinos quite often. He always gambled within his means, though. He was never irresponsible in that respect. Even though he had the money to gamble, he never went above and beyond.
So Ming Jiang was in a very different situation to Yang Lu. Ming Jiang was originally from China. He moved over to the UK. He lived in the Beswick area in North Manchester. He rented that flat. At the time of the murder, he really was in serious debt problems. He'd spent quite a long time at casinos, he was a regular gambler, in fact so much so that he had VIP status.
We believe that they met in a casino when they share the same interest to gamble. They met in a Manchester casino.
But Yang Lu could never have imagined that their relationship could be so deadly.
Ming Jiang was very well known in the casino community. In some casinos, he had quite specialised status due to the large amounts of money that he was gambling. Yet in other casinos, he had markers on him due to his erratic and volatile behaviour. It was my understanding that he was a great fun guy to be around when he was winning, but it was a very, very different case when he was losing.
He lost a huge amount of money, and as far as we know, is sort of a £200,000 debt, and he's been chasing by the debtor, the creditor within the community.
It was the Crown's case that Ming Jiang had accrued extensive debts. We had knowledge that he had historically acquired over £270,000 worth of debt within 2 casinos. He was struggling to pay off those debts. We knew that he had pawned some wristwatches for over £15,000 to try and keep the debtors at bay.
Getting more and more desperate to pay off his debts, it appears Ming Jiang hatched an evil plan.
Ming Jiang was in huge amounts of debt. He had no income or wherewithal with which to repay that debt, and the only way he believed he could do that was either through his addiction of gambling and waiting for the big win, or through extreme measures. He used the alternative of planning the murder of his friend.
When the police found Ming Jiang, he was actually in possession of Mr. Yang Lu's passport and his bank cards. So at this point, it's safe to assume that he was trying to assume his identity.
So Ming Jiang had taken Yang Lu's life and then he took his identity. He basically used all his personal information in order to extract money through his bank cards. He even tried to sell his flat, and he was making good progress on that at the point at which he'd been arrested. There was nothing that he wouldn't do in order to extract as much money and value out of.
In Manchester, Ming Jiang's trial for the murder of Yang Lu begins.
So the trial was conducted in April of 2017. Shortly prior to the trial hearing, we did meet with the victims' parents, and we had to reassure them that we would do our utmost to be able to obtain justice for their son.
The court hears how Ming Jiang had a checkered history.
Ming Jiang was a Hong Kong national. Before he came to the UK, he was working as cabin crew for a German airline, where he was actually convicted for credit card fraud.
The police found that he had convictions in Germany for shoplifting, convictions for identity fraud and forgery of documents in Switzerland. He had convictions for credit card fraud in Scotland. So as a result of that, as the reviewing lawyer, it was my job then to write international letters of request. I had to make formal requests to Germany and Switzerland to obtain evidence of those convictions, which we then subsequently at the trial hearing submitted as evidence of bad character.
The prosecution believes Ming Jiang was planning to use his experience of identity fraud to build a new life for himself.
It appeared quite clearly that Ming Jiang understood his way around the financial system, and the kind of things that he did and the way that he adopted the identity, for example, by using Yang Lu's phone to contact banks, etc. That showed quite a little bit of knowledge of how to basically defraud and use identity theft to his advantage.
This was premeditated, it was planned. He had devised a plan as to how he was going to assume his victim's identity and obtain all of his assets and walk away. He was probably going to walk away from his debts, take what money he could get from his victim and return to China. I believe that would have been his plan.
The motive behind the murder was quite clearly greed. It was obvious that Ming Jiang understood that Yang Lu had a lot of money. He lived in a nice area of Manchester. He owned his own flat. He dabbled in stocks and shares, and the contact that they'd had together, we believe that there would have been some understanding from Ming Jiang's point of view that Yang Lu was pretty wealthy.
During the trial, Ming Jiang's story changes several times.
Ming Jiang showed no remorse whatsoever throughout the whole process. He came out with bizarre and incredulous accounts, changing the overall story on a number of occasions. Initially, he claimed that Yang Lu was an escort and that they were in a relationship. There was absolutely no evidence to support that.
So he wasn't consistent in his account that he was providing to the police. He did pursue that through to the trial hearing and maintained that it was a different Chinese male called Mr. Wong who had committed the act of murder, and he tried to distance himself by using this fictional character.
He later on claimed that there was a kind of third-party gangster-type individual who was involved that Yang Lu owed money to. Again, from an investigation point of view, we were able to show that that simply wasn't the case.
Ming Jiang fabricated Mr. Wong, and he gave the phone number to the police. However, when the police checked the record of the phone, and it's find out that the phone number is only created a date before they believed Liu Yong died.
So all the explanations that Ming Jiang provided were easily discounted and showed that he was just making things up as he went along.
The jury is shown CCTV from the night police believe Yang Lu was murdered, in a bid to prove that Ming Jiang was the last to see him.
The evidence we used, we had a digital sequence of events that displayed all of the CCTV footage and the appropriate stills. So we had the stills showing that Ming Jiang was friends with the victim and that they had attended the casino together on the 3rd of October. And then subsequently, Ming Jiang had clearly lured him to his flat on the 5th of October, and we had a still digital photo of Yang Lu leaving the Metrolink tram stop at Velo Park, which was the closest one to Ming Jiang's home address.
From a CCTV point of view, that was the last point at which Yang Lu had been seen, so that was on the 5th of October.
So his movements shortly after the time that we believe that he had killed Yang Lu, he used the bank cards that he'd acquired. He used them at B&Q to purchase cleaning products, paint with which to paint the flat. He went to the petrol station on numerous occasions, and he was seen to be filling one, if not two, containers of petrol, which we then subsequently believe that he used to set the body on fire.
Having killed his supposed friend and made attempts to clean the evidence, it appears Ming Jiang goes back to doing what he loves best.
In the early hours of the 6th of October, Ming Jiang spent 30 minutes at the casino. He also spent time at the casino after the deposition. So in the early hours of the 10th of October, he spent around 4 hours. And if you can imagine, he's literally just taken the torso of the body, he's dumped it up in Tinswhistle, and then he set it on fire, returned back to his flat, and the first thing he does is head to the casino to spend Yang Lu's money and gamble.
his actions aren't the actions of what you would expect a normal person to do. And it's a terrible thing to murder somebody. But then to murder somebody and dismember the body and then dump it and set on fire, it's just an incredibly callous act, and it probably speaks a lot about his character.
After hearing the evidence, the jury retires to consider its verdict.
So the jury in this case sat for 4 weeks, and under normal circumstances, you generally expect around about a day's deliberation per week. So under normal circumstances, it would take 4 days to come to a decision. But in this case, it only took them 4 hours, and that shows you really how overwhelming the evidence was.
After weeks of evidence is a very short period of time, and I believe would demonstrate that they were absolutely sure in a very short space of time that Ming Jiang was guilty of this offence.
At the point that they gave their verdict, Ming Jiang was completely emotionless. He showed nothing at all. At that point, he went back into custody, and sentencing took place a week later. The judge actually sentenced him in his absence because he refused to come to court.
The presiding judge made a point of stating that the starting point for a sentence would be 30 years, due to it being solely the sole purpose being for gain, and in this case for money. However, he outlined aggravating features such as the extensive dismemberment of the body, the complete lack of remorse, and the misleading of evidence. And he made a point of saying that it might be that the authorities never deem him to be safe to be returned to the community, and that he could spend the rest of his life in prison.
On the 2nd of May, 2017, Ming Jiang is sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 33 years. He has never revealed the whereabouts of Yang Lu's limbs or head.
The saddest thing about this murder is Ming Jiang's greed caused the loss of the life of a young 36-year-old man, leaving behind 2 very grief-stricken, distraught parents.
His family didn't know the last time they spoke to him on the phone, the last time they saw him in person was going to be the last time. I think, yeah, it's really devastating that they never got to say goodbye to their only son.
A woman devoted to her town.
She was the deputy county treasurer. Away from the courthouse, you saw a different person. She loved to dance.
Her life snuffed out in a savage attack.
There was quite a bit of blood. She had to be beaten pretty severely.
She had to have been terrified. She struggled at the end of her life.
She had no enemies. Nobody had a clue who would do something like that.
Police investigate several troubling theories.
Is it a close friend that got into an argument with her?
There had been some shouting matches.
Maybe she interrupted a burglary or a theft.
After months of false leads and dead ends,
The town was on high alert.
a stunning discovery breaks open the case.
It added a new twist to the crime.
All of a sudden you realize, maybe I don't know all my neighbors.
And points to a murderer in their midst.
I was kind of speechless at first.
I thought, my gosh. I mean, you just can't believe it.
The tiny farming community of Colon, Nebraska is one of the smallest towns in America, with a population of just over 100 people.
Colon, Nebraska is a very laid-back community, very close-knit families there. I think that if you went there, you'd drive through and you go, oh, this is small.
Many people would leave their doors unlocked, their cars unlocked, keys left in the ignition, just a feel of safety that there's no threat.
But then on June 30th, 2003, police receive a distressing call.
Around 6:42 in the evening, dispatch indicated to me that they had received a report of a possible suicide.
A friend ended up finding her body across the street in her garage, along with a gun.
He had called 911 and it was reported as a suicide. Once I arrived, the firemen on scene already were pointing me to a garage. I walked in and could see the body of a white female that was laying on the ground. There was quite a bit of blood and there was disfigurement to the head and face area, so we could not recognize the victim. A black handgun was found near her head.
There is so much blood on the scene, investigators aren't able to determine the cause of death and need to wait for an autopsy to be sure.
The small black handgun didn't actually contain bullets, and we didn't find any shell casings in the area. The car had a smear on the driver's side, and then I did find that there was a smear of what appeared to be blood on the walk-in door that went out the side of the garage.
There was also what looked like blood spatter, where someone stepped in the pool of blood.
There was a footprint impression that was taken
that indicated that there was a second person there. This was a suspicious death.
There were DNA swabs taken on her body and of her clothing that she was wearing at the time. We noticed that her purse was located underneath her vehicle.
Was this just a botched burglary, or did the person have some other intention?
From the personal items in her purse, police identify the victim as 66-year-old Sharon Erickson.
Sharon was very well known. It was shocking to us as law enforcement to see somebody that was a fixture in the community being the victim in this case.
Born and raised in Nebraska's farm country, Sharon Erickson was a lifelong government worker.
Sharon worked across the hall from me. She was the deputy county treasurer. She was excellent, very honest. I would put her against anybody in the state of Nebraska for knowledge when it comes to the office of the treasurer. She would do anything for you. Gosh darn. When it came to the office or anything, she was always attendant and very, very helpful always.
In 1998, after 37 years of devoted service, Sharon retired.
Away from the courthouse, you saw a different person, more relaxed. She loved to dance, and if anyone wanted to dance, boom, she was on the dance floor. And boy, she was so good at dancing. I'm telling you what, boy, she could dance every dance until they'd shut the music off.
As a single woman, Sharon lived alone, but saw the people of Colon as her family.
People used to go to the bar and have coffee. Well, that one closed. Sharon came over and she says, I have a little front room in my house there. Would you come and remodel it and paint it for me? She had me fix that room up and gave the locals a key for coffee. Had a coffee pot in there. It was just somewhere where they could go. She didn't charge them. That's the type of person that you're talking about.
Police are at a loss when they realize Sharon was attacked just 50 feet away from the gathering spot she gifted to the town. Who could have wanted to kill her and why? Detectives expand their search for evidence to Sharon's home.
She lived in what used to be a grocery store and had converted to her house.
The other odd thing about Sharon's residence is that her garage was located across her house, and so to get to her car, she would have to walk out the front of her house and across Main Street.
What or who could have lured Sharon out of her home and to her death in the garage?
We did find some damage to the back door that appeared to be consistent with some forced entry.
There was a coal chisel that was found next to the door that more than likely was used.
We also did find that the phone line had been cut.
There was at least some planning on the attack.
Someone was obviously trying to prevent her from calling for help.
Inside, there was nothing out of place. When we started going room by room, we found that there was a holster for a small gun in her bedroom near the bed, and the gun was missing. That, along with her bed not being made and the back door having damage and being pried open, we started to have a picture in our minds that this may have occurred in the middle of the night.
Our assumption was that there was a burglary. She was alerted to the burglary because of noise coming from the person prying on the back door, that she got up out of bed, grabbed her gun, and went to investigate what was occurring before she was killed.
As investigators continue to process the scene, they are interrupted by volunteer firefighter and village postmaster Rick Hartman.
He was friends with Sharon. He actually was the one that found her body.
Mr. Hartman appeared to be a little more interested in the situation than some of the other firefighters that were there. Mr. Hartman had to be asked on several different occasions to stay behind the crime scene tape.
After it kept happening, it really alerted a lot of us to, why does he keep doing this? Is there something else going on? Is there something wrong?
Rick's behavior makes officers immediately suspicious, so they approach him for an interview on site.
During the interview, Mr. Hartman had indicated that he was really close friends with Sharon.
When Sharon would leave town, she would leave a key in her post office box for him to check on her house. So he was trusted by her.
Sharon would come visit him every day when she'd come pick up her mail.
But Rick tells police he didn't see Sharon that morning. He was asked to check on her after a worried relative didn't hear from Sharon that evening.
Rick Hartman, he had gone looking for Sharon. Sharon was nowhere to be found.
Mr. Hartman opened the garage door and you could see Sharon laying beside her car.
Without prompting, he indicated that it was a suicide, that she had a gun, knew how to use it. But we were very confident that there was foul play involved.
When Rick is asked to make a formal statement, his demeanor abruptly changes.
He said, "If you're going to arrest me, otherwise I'm leaving." I was taken aback.
Why would he say that? Why would he do that?
We needed to look a little harder at this person and find out what that was all about.
Coming up, new evidence reveals a disturbing detail.
She'd been sexually assaulted. I was definitely shocked.
Small-town gossip sparks salacious rumors.
There may have been more than just a friendship there.
He was trying to hide additional evidence.
And just when detectives think they have the killer in their sights,
It had to be him.
a startling truth is revealed.
It sent shockwaves through the entire area. I went, what? You've got to be kidding me.
Police investigating the murder of Sharon Erickson are speaking to her close friend, Rick Hartman. But when they ask him for a statement, Rick suddenly ends the interview.
He was upset that he couldn't leave, and finally just told the investigators that, I'm going to leave, and if you want to arrest me, go ahead and arrest me.
That was pretty out of character and uncharacteristic for somebody who had a friend that was just killed. So that immediately caused investigators some concern.
His statements and odd behavior really pointed us in a direction towards the postmaster.
Mr. Hartman gave his alibi. He was at home with his family, and that was confirmed by his wife.
Rick never had any criminal record or had done anything wrong, so there wasn't a great deal of focus on him any more than anybody else.
Rick's on the back burner for now, but investigators will keep him in their sights.
We didn't want to rule anybody out specifically, but we wanted to cast a wide net.
While investigators consider their next move, News of the murder, the first one in 40 years, travels fast.
The town of Colon was buzzing. Well, I got calls, bang, bang, bang. I can't remember who called first. I went, what? That's all I got, and I just was dumbfounded. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. When you hear of someone that you know and you knew for 25, 30 years, it's devastating. Everyone's just shaking their heads saying, how can this happen? How can this happen?
Sharon's death was a big loss for our community. She had known so many people through her work, through her friends, and to not have her in the community anymore, that always creates a hole. Everybody spoke well of her.
She was beloved by the people in the community. We didn't know where to start looking, so we tried to determine anything potentially that could have happened. Is it a close friend that got into an argument with her? Is it a neighbor that maybe didn't like her?
The day after the murder, police canvassed Sharon's neighborhood.
They questioned almost everybody that knew Sharon about, have you heard anything? Do you have any information that can help us? And I said, I have no idea. No idea. She had no enemies. Nobody had a clue who would do something like that. It has to be someone that we don't know. I mean, it has to be someone that came from town.
While we don't have a lot of violent crime in the area, there was definitely one family that lived right behind Sharon that came to mind as somebody that could have been concerning.
The investigators had made contact with Jim Mars. He was an individual that would get into trouble here and there.
He wasn't real responsible. He associated with people that were involved in minor crimes such as burglaries, drug use.
I asked what his relationship with Sharon was, and basically it was just an acquaintance. Mr. Mars would see her occasionally outside of her house when he was going to the post office or on Main Street. They would say hi. He said he got in trouble by her a couple times for mischief when he was younger, and she would yell at him.
When we interviewed Jim Mars, he didn't know anything about Sharon's death, and he was so sorry that she died.
Jim had been in Kansas doing a roofing job. After he got back from Kansas, he eventually went to Wahoo, drank some beer with a friend, attempted to go to another bar. At that time, it was after closing time, and he drove the back roads home to Colon. He estimated he got home about 1:30 in the morning. Stayed up, watched TV, drank a pop, and then eventually went to bed.
His mom confirmed the time that he came home. Everything seemed to be okay with his story.
Investigators don't know the exact time of Sharon's death, so the 24-year-old remains on the suspect list. Before police leave, Jim gives them a tip.
Jim had indicated that there was a trucker that always had interactions and always seemed to be bickering with Miss Erickson. The truck driver may have parked a little bit on her property and she'd get upset about it. He might have his engine running on his truck and it would bother her.
She would bring it to his attention and he would not necessarily comply with her request.
It was no secret the two didn't get along.
We were gaining information from friends that Sharon had had disputes with this man.
Detectives must now determine if a run-in with the trucker turned fatal.
A lot of the community members felt that the truck driver was doing things to antagonize her and to cause more problems between them.
That was something that was public because there had been some shouting matches, some vocal exchanges about the fact that this truck was running all night.
Some of the people in the community who knew that he wasn't overly fond with Sharon, they kind of rumored him to be a suspect.
Maybe the frustration amongst the two had just finally boiled over. It just seemed suspicious.
I know the investigators had attempted to reach out to the truck driver in question and were unable to contact him.
Police do all they can, but can't track down the driver's whereabouts.
today's technology is there's cameras everywhere. You're using your cell phone. At the time of this homicide, that kind of technology wasn't prevalent.
We didn't know if we were going to find that person.
Is Sharon Erickson's murderer on the run?
That's concerning, and that was on the minds of probably all the citizens in this area. And probably the scariest thing for law enforcement in the community is that person likely to offend again?
Police hunting the killer of 66-year-old Sharon Erickson have a new suspect, a truck driver she had clashed with several times.
Had something escalated from vocal argument to some other level.
Now, detectives fear the trucker has fled the area.
We went door to door, asked people if they saw the truck driver. No one had any information about him, and it didn't appear we were any further along than we were the night we got there, and the town was on high alert.
There's a murderer out there. It's hard to contemplate. Hard to contemplate.
A week after Sharon's murder, detectives received the autopsy results.
The report did indicate that the death would have occurred sometime, most likely that night or the early morning hours of the day that she was found.
The medical examiner indicated that there was no gunshot wounds, that the gun had not been used in the commission of the crime.
The pathologist ruled the cause of death to be asphyxiation along with blunt force trauma.
It was found that Sharon had been beaten pretty severely. She had also been strangled. She also suffered some broken ribs and had some defensive wounds on her hands from fighting off her attacker.
The autopsy contains one more disturbing detail.
She had a small vaginal tear as well, which indicated that she'd been sexually assaulted. I was definitely shocked that there was a sexual assault involved.
Totally unexpected. It added a new twist to the crime, which further led to more questions. It really makes you feel for the victim. She had to have been terrified for those few minutes that she struggled at the end of her life.
During the autopsy, her underwear were taken for possible examination for DNA. This being pretty early in the DNA process in the early 2000s, we waited.
2 days later, on July 10th, the trucker is back in town and police bring him in for questioning.
He's not overly cooperative. He was reluctant to give any details about where he was, what he was doing.
Detectives press the trucker on his relationship with Sharon.
The truck driver wouldn't have called Sharon a friend. He felt irritated by the way she would overreact, I believe is how he termed it.
He did not have a good relationship with her.
But the truck driver vows he's no killer.
He told us he was out of town at the time of the homicide. He was in Wyoming or Colorado. He was hundreds of miles away and had receipts to prove it. Officers were sent off to corroborate the receipt. He was asked for a DNA sample and a polygraph, and he refused.
Was the trucker hiding something?
It's just one of the things that you can add to a list of items that if there's too many on that list, it's a problem.
With nothing concrete linking the trucker to the homicide, detectives have to let him go.
Law enforcement officers were in the process of interviewing and chasing down alibis.
We'd been following up with people, but there was not a lot of new information coming in and not a lot of credible information.
With Sharon's murder still unsolved, the community remains on high alert.
Before this happened, it was probably one of the safest places you'd want to be. Everyone's on their toes. You know, you drive up, you lock your car, you lock your house, you watch everything. Here's a lady that just retired, 60-some years old. Who could do this? It just was a shock to the whole county.
As a community, You want resolution, or you at least want to know why it happened and how can we get some justice out of this.
Although the entire town is mourning the loss of Sharon, Rick Hartman seems to be taking an unnaturally keen interest in the investigation.
Rick would ask us about what we were doing about other leads, and then he would insert his thoughts.
His behavior was a little more pushy, trying to get as much information as Rick could.
Is this just a concerned friend who wants to see how the investigation's going, or is there something more to than that?
Despite his odd behavior, Rick still has a solid alibi, and the investigation stalls.
We decided that we all needed to get back together and just have like a brainstorm session and say, what do we do? One of the things that we talked about is at the time of the homicide, early 2000s, meth had been a problem.
People would steal anhydrous ammonia from tanks and then use that to create their own methamphetamine.
Some of these people were heavy addicts, very dangerous, and involved in a lot of crimes.
One of the things that was being discussed with the anhydrous tanks was they were not too far from Sharon's home. So could she have seen something? Could she have spotted something, said something to make someone believe that she knew who they were and what they were doing?
Did Sharon confront them? Did they attack her to keep her quiet?
We might be looking for somebody who's manufacturing and selling methamphetamine who may have been in Colon on that particular night.
"5 weeks after Sharon Erickson is savagely beaten to death, detectives investigate whether she had been killed by a criminal gang manufacturing illegal drugs near her home.
It's an easy target, no cameras in that area. We were aware that Sharon kept an eye on Main Street. She a lot of times had information about suspicious people, something going on after hours there.
Sharon was one that if she saw something that she didn't think was right, she wasn't afraid to stand up and say something.
Maybe she saw something that she shouldn't have. She interrupted a burglary or a theft. As we talked to people around town, they also indicated that that might have been one of the reasons why Sharon may have been murdered.
Investigators had talked to local suspects who were involved in the manufacturing of methamphetamine. People that we had arrested previous to this incident, and then people from the metro areas. Most of them have pretty extensive criminal records, and they're heavily addicted. So the level of cooperation with somebody who's addicted to methamphetamine is not going to be very good.
It creates a difficult picture to paint. We were not able to generate the type of evidence or leads that we really would hope for.
We as a department were frustrated with things not happening real fast and the way that you always want.
The canvas fails to yield the information police were looking for, as does the investigation into the trucker.
As the investigation unfolded, the truck driver was eliminated. He was miles and miles away from the incident. We contacted the establishment where he got fuel, and it wasn't a phony receipt.
With this, the driver is fully off the suspect list.
After doing the first set of interviews and looking at potential suspects, the investigators really weren't able to focus on anybody that would be so mad or somebody that would want to sexually assault Sharon or to kill her. So it kind of left a lot of question marks. Where do you go? What do you look for? There's just a lot of unknowns.
We just don't know what's going on. Do we feel safe or do we need to worry?
Everybody had their ideas who did this, and I think it just kept going and going and going. People didn't have a clue, but they wanted to talk about it.
There was a lot of discussion amongst the community members as to what was going on, a lot of rumors floating around.
One of these rumors that starts circulating has to do with one of Sharon's good friends and a familiar name to detectives.
Because of Rick's close contact with Sharon, small town rumors began to surface that there may have been more than just a friendship there.
Many of the community members had mentioned rumors that Rick Hartman and Sharon had been having an affair.
We start to wonder, was there more to their friendship, maybe in a romantic way?
There was talk. This was something that was being discussed, so it's not that hard of a thought process or big of a leap to say, could he be involved?
Police talked to Rick again, this time at the sheriff's office.
He was cooperative. He somehow, I think, liked the attention.
But that changes when detectives ask Rick some very pointed questions.
Law enforcement actually asked him if there was a romantic relationship between the two of them.
He was immediately offended, and he denied that.
Mr. Hartman appeared to be very distraught. He said he was just friends with her, that there was no romantic relationship.
Could the sexual assault that appeared in Sharon's autopsy actually have been a consensual encounter with Rick?
That question certainly seems accusatory. Those things are not comfortable, but that comes with the job. You got to do your job. Rick was questioned in detail and really scrutinized on where he was, what his involvement was. There were a number of times he said, we got to look somewhere else because we're wasting our time on him.
He became agitated and wanted to go home.
Rick stands by the alibi he gave police back when they first questioned him 7 weeks ago at the crime scene.
Rick was home with his wife at the time that we believe Sharon was killed.
The investigators went and corroborated his story with his wife again.
We really had no reason to believe that Rick's wife would not disclose if he were gone at that time. Even though there were a lot of things that kind of pointed to him, he had a pretty good alibi.
With no hard evidence against Rick, detectives have to let him go, but not before getting one thing.
We collected DNA from Mr. Hartman.
We talked a little about it, and he says, but Don, I didn't do it. But again, you always have that doubt, what happened?
There was just speculation and suspicion.
2 months after Sharon's murder, detectives finally receive results from the forensics lab.
They had tried to do analysis on some of the items which were collected at autopsy to come up with a DNA profile.
Will this be the break detectives have been hoping for?
We were really needing something such as that to come through for us.
Two months after the murder of Sharon Erickson, police hope the DNA results they've been waiting for will confirm who they suspect is her killer.
There was quite a bit of speculation that it could be the postmaster in town.
We were contacted by our state patrol lab. They believed that there was something there, but that they could not separate out a complete profile for comparison. It was kind of frustrating to know that there may be something there, but that maybe it was a dead end that we couldn't get past.
Without a DNA match, we as investigators knew that if that was the case, it would be very hard to solve this crime.
But detectives aren't giving up.
The Nebraska Medical Center could test smaller quantities than the State Patrol Lab could do. So we made the determination that we would take our evidence and send it in to the other lab and have more DNA testing done.
Results will take months to come back, and with a killer still on the loose, nerves in small-town Colon, Nebraska begin to fray.
When the investigation went on and on and on, I thought, come on, we've got to find something. We had a murder back in 69 or 68 that was never solved in Wahoo. And of course, right away, you think, gosh, we got to find out who did this.
Could it be someone we do know? There can be a mistrust. All of a sudden you realize, maybe I don't know all my neighbors.
Then, police receive an unexpected tip that points back to the man they can't seem to rule out.
The estate of Sharon Erickson had a garage sale, and Rick Hartman was at the garage sale.
Mr. Hartman went in and purchased her mattress, and that was suspicious to us. If there was some sort of maybe DNA evidence or something that would be on the mattress that would be of interest to law enforcement, by somebody purchasing that and maybe getting rid of it, then it would be something that we would no longer be able to go back and utilize at a later time.
Did he want the mattress because they did have potential sexual activity on the mattress? Maybe he was out there trying to hide additional evidence. Every time the investigators seemed to close a loophole with Mr. Hartman, something else happened. He kept drawing attention to him. It was just another thing that brought him back on radar.
Law enforcement asked him about his attendance there and what he bought. He actually denied that he bought her mattress. So then that caused law enforcement some concern on why would you buy it? Okay, why, if you did buy it, why would you lie about it?
Mr. Hartman agreed to undergo a polygraph, so he cooperated in that aspect, but he seemed nervous, on edge, jittery. The results from that polygraph were inconclusive. It left a lot of questions unanswered. It just added a little fuel to the fire.
Every chance that we could get that he could clear his name seemed to be something that elevated him to the next level.
The people in town were thinking it had to be him and were scared to go to the post office.
In a small community where pretty much everybody knows everybody, it's easy to point fingers, it's easy to cast doubts.
I golfed with Rick Hartman that week at our golf league, and he was just nervous, he was just edgy and just scared.
A number of us may have felt like Mr. Hartman had acted inappropriately or suspiciously. We just didn't have enough to really push it over the top.
There was nothing that we could charge him with. We had no evidence that he committed the crime, other than he kept interjecting himself in the investigation.
Detectives hope that definitive proof will come from the Medical Center Forensic Lab.
The last piece that we didn't have back yet was the DNA evidence.
We got a phone call and they were able to isolate a DNA profile.
They actually located a sperm cell on her clothing, which was a positive breakthrough for us. The only person that it could have been from would have been the person that had sexually assaulted her and presumably killed her.
We felt that there was more hope in solving this than we had had for quite a while, because at least DNA is something that we can link to a specific person.
Armed with this DNA profile, police immediately zero in on their top suspect.
We did send in Rick Hartman's DNA. Came back not a match.
Rick's name is finally cleared from the suspect list once and for all.
Scientific evidence is what it is. It confirmed everything that he was telling us. There was no romantic relationship.
We were focused on an individual that had absolutely nothing to do with the homicide. I apologize for any stress we caused him or his family.
But if it wasn't Rick, then who killed Sharon?
One of the big concerns that we had is that if this was a stranger that was maybe passing through town, or someone completely not associated with the community or with Sharon, that it potentially could go unsolved without any additional evidence coming forward.
Investigators are back to square one, but they come up with a new game plan.
We try to determine who else should we go out and collect samples from, who else were potential suspects, who could have done this, and who would provide those samples so we can send them in and see if there's a match.
It was just a matter of being able to find that one person out there in the world that belonged to. We're trying to get that needle in a haystack.
10 months after Sharon's murder, in April 2004, police get the results of their DNA dragnet.
The lab got a confirmation that they had a match.
We now know who killed Sharon. It was the breakthrough that we needed.
It sent shockwaves through the entire area.
Almost a year after the murder of Sharon Erickson, police have matched DNA from the crime scene to her killer.
The DNA came back and it matched Jim Mars.
James lived nearby to Sharon. He was one of the people that police talked to early on.
Jim had known Sharon nearly all his life.
He had helped her out when he was younger, doing some yard work or snow removal.
I was kind of speechless at first because he had no problem providing his DNA to law enforcement.
I was shocked to find out that James Mars was the perpetrator. We had never seen that type of violence out of him.
Once we had a DNA match with Jim, we needed to figure out where the holes in his alibi are.
When we originally interviewed Jim Mars, he said he'd been out in a bar in Wahoo and later went home. The bartender believed the timeline that Jim had given us was fairly accurate.
Jim's mother stands by her story, too.
I think those alibis were solid, but they didn't cover him for the whole evening. What I think happened is he was home and left. He lived right across the back alley from Sharon's house. And even if he would have been home, that doesn't mean he didn't leave his house. The determination was that we did have enough evidence to proceed with the arrest and prosecution of Jim.
We went to his residence very early in the morning, and he answered the door, and we placed him under arrest. He was shocked that he was being arrested, that he was considered the suspect. We brought him in to interview him.
Police try to establish a motive.
That was one of the unique things in this case, to find out and even just try to resolve that big why. Why would that even happen?
He was reluctant to give any details. There were a number of times he said, "I don't remember." He sobbed at times.
He said he didn't have anything to do with it, denied that he had any involvement. When asked about the sexual assault, he stated that Sharon was an old lady and he wouldn't do that. And from that point on, he stated he wanted an attorney, and we stopped our questioning.
We had filed charges for first-degree homicide, sexual assault.
News of his arrest hits the community hard.
This was very unexpected. I thought, my gosh, something's wrong here. I mean, you just can't believe it. I was hoping that they'd catch someone that I did not know the family.
The reaction in town was split. There was definitely a thought that, oh, it couldn't have been him that did it. And then there were supporters that, well, we thought maybe it was him.
While investigators are confident that DNA evidence will be enough to get a conviction, they get even more ammunition against Jim.
We had at least 5 inmates come forward with information that Mr. Mars had confessed to them. He struck her, strangled her, killed her. These inmates were going to testify against him that he had confessed to them.
With this information, investigators pieced together what happened the night of the murder.
Jim was at the bar, like he said. He had a few too many drinks at some point. Went home. He wasn't able to sleep.
From what he told the other inmates, he was looking for some money. He thought Sharon may be an easy target. He was just going to burglarize her house.
He climbed over Sharon's fence in the backyard, cut her phone line so she wouldn't be able to call anybody, pried her back door open, and ended up kicking the door in order to go see if he could find her purse or find some money that was laying around.
Once that back door was kicked in, Sharon woke up.
He was confronted by Sharon, who was holding a gun. and threatened to shoot him at that point if he didn't leave.
Sharon went to call 911 and her phone line was dead. She kept her cell phone in her car for emergencies.
Sharon ran across the street to get into her car. Jim chased her down, caught her, and ended up attacking her.
He punched her and then eventually choked her to death.
There was a sexual assault. He refused to talk to the inmates about that.
Had he not sexually assaulted her and we didn't have any DNA, we would never have it solved when you have a sperm cell that was a perfect match. There's nobody else that could be responsible.
The chance of this being another person was out of this world. With the evidence we had, this was a slam dunk for his conviction.
On August 15th, 2005, Jim Mars pleads guilty to second-degree murder. He is sentenced to life with no possibility of parole.
When I found out there was a sexual assault that went along with the slaying, I was just furious. What kind of person would do something like this? You've got to be kidding me. And the community was appalled. I was happy that we finally got closure. He did it. He's locked up.
Sharon was the one that suffered the ultimate loss. And that's what the investigators put in all those hours of work for and give her her last voice.
Sharon's presence is missed in Colon to this day.
To not have her in the community, that's tough. There's pain and sadness.
Sharon loved her community. Yes, she did. She was very good to my kids and very good to me and my family. Really good lady.